activity is the activity of the transaction. Activity is transaction to be treated as a supply of the goods or the supply or the supply. Section 7(1) Section 7 the Section 7 classifies the certain activities transaction constituting the supply either as a supply either as a supply of supply of goods or the supply of the services. The schedule 2 of the CGST Act contains the list of the activities or the transactions having classified either as a supply of the goods or the supply of the services. The transfer of the title of the goods, right of the goods, undivided share. The property shall be passed to the future date, and then the para 2 the land and building. Para 3 the treatment of the process of the mostly called job work services. Para 4 the transfer of the business assets. Then the person ceases to be a taxable person. The goods forming a part of the assets of any other business carried on by a person who ceases to be a taxable person shall be deemed to be supplied by him in the course of the furtherance of his business immediately before he ceases to be a taxable person. Mr. X, a trader, is winding up his business and applying for the desegregation, deregistration of the goods and the supplies. The exception the business transfer as a going concern personal representative comment. In this case it is immaterial that the registered person has taken the credit of such goods lying in the stock at a time of its purchase or not. Then the renting of the immovable property. Para 5 the activity is always treated as a supply of the services. The renting of the immovable property, the construction of the complex building, civil structure, etc. The construction of the complex building, civil structure are the part thereof, including the complex of the building is a supply of the service, except with the entire consideration who has been received after the issuance of the completion certificate. Therefore, it is a completion and the authority after the first occupation, whichever is earlier. Now the comments. The term construction includes the addition, alteration, replacement, or the remodeling of any existing civil structure. The expression competent authority means the government or any authority authorized to issue the completion certificate under any law or the time being in force. In case of the non-requirement of such certificate from such authority from the persons like architect, chartered engineer, and then licensed surveyor, the entire consideration is received after the issuance of the completion certificate or after its first occupation, whichever is earlier, then it is not a supply at all. Section 7 to read with the schedule 3 entry. Construction of the services intended for sale before completion, intended for sale before consideration, before completion, site of a flat value 80 lakh. Then before completion 4 lakh 20 lakh and completion certificate after the service taxable, not a supply after completion, not a supply. Now temporary transfer for permitting use or the enjoyment of the intellectual property right. IPR includes copyright, patent, trademark, designs, any then the development, design, programming, customization, adoption, upgradation, enhancement, implementation of the IT software, the sale of the pre-packed can shrink wrapped software, supply of the goods, license or use of the packaged prepacked canned shrink wrapped software as supply of the services, customized software, predominant nature, supply of the services, agreeing to the obligation to different from an act means any act which binds a person or of not to do or do not doing the particular things in a particular manner in which the given circumstances the obligations to tolerate an act or a situation means to accept the occurrence or the existence of an act of a particular things or a particular thing which is imposed by a condition or a circumstances in the contract, agreement, or any other document which is legally enforceable by law. The obligation to do an act means to perform or to do something necessarily prescribed in an agreement, contract, or any other document which is required under the law or timing in force. Now the transfer of the right to use any goods or any purpose, whether or not for the specified period for cash deferred payment or other valuable consideration. Supply of the services. Now the composite supply, the work contract is defined in section 2 clause 119. Definition under section 2 clause 19. To definition under section 2 clause 119. The works contract means a contract for the building construction, fabrication, completion, erection, a contract for building construction, fabrication, completion, erection, installation, fitting out, improvement, modification, maintenance, renovation, or commissioning of any immovable property wherein the transfer of the property in the goods, then whether as goods or in the other form is involved in the execution of such contract. Now labor plus material is equals to work contract. Labor plus material is equals to work contract. The comments under GST regime, the work contract only in the relation to the immovable property is covered, and no concept of the contract exists in relation to the immovable property. The works contract of the movable property is equals to supply of the services, entry supply of service, entry 6A, and the schedule 2 and schedule 2. The labor plus material contract of the movable property is equals to processing cost of the processing of the goods is equals to supply of the services. The work contract of the movable property, supply of the services under 6A of the schedule 2. Labor plus material contract of the movable goods is equals to processing of the goods, supply of the services, entry 3 of the schedule 2. Now the supply of the goods for the human consumption, restaurant, catering, mess, eating joints, etc. This class covers the supply of the goods including the goods of the other articles for the human consumption, for any drink excluding the alcoholic liquor for the human consumption, along with the supply of the services. Work contract is equals to contract of the building construction, fabrication, completion, erection, installation, repairs, etc. plus any immovable property plus of any immovable property where transfer of the property in the goods is involved. Para 6A. The applicability on the liquidated damages compensation and the penalty arising out of the breach contract or other provisions of the law. Circular. Now agreement to refrain, tolerate or to do an act under the GST, agreeing to refrain from the act. The tolerate an act situation or to do act in considered if consider act is considered a supply of the services as per para 5 of the schedule 2 of the schedule 2. The conditions for the taxability to qualify as a taxable supply under para 5e of the schedule 2, the certain conditions must be met. There must be an expressed or implied agreement or contract. The consideration must flow in return of this contract. Such an arrangement can be independent contract or a part of the another contract if the payment is merely in the event of the course of the performance of the agreement, and it does not represent the object of such of the contract, then it can be considered as a consideration not treated as a supply. Then the liquidated damages is the contract when the contract are not taxable as they are not considered consideration for tolerating a breach. They are the payment of the debtor, check dishonor, fine for these are considered the consideration for any services are not taxable. Penalties for the violation of the law. The penalties imposed. The penalties imposed for the violation of the law, such as traffic violation or pollution norms, are as taxable. The forfeiture of the salary or the bond amount, the amounts recovered for the forfeiture of the salary or the bond in the employment contract are not taxable as they discourage the non serious employees. Late payment charges when apart. Principal supply same as the rate of the fixed charges. Fixed charges for power. The fixed charges for the power are not taxable as they are for the sale of the electricity, which is exempt from the GST collection charges. Cancellation charges. The charges for the cancellation in the case of the passenger transport services are assessed as the principal supply as they are naturally bundled with it. Now the forfeiture of the earnest money. Forfeiture of the earnest money. Earnest money in certain cases such as the immovable property agreement breach or the non-serious bidder penalties is not taxable as it represents the mere flow of the money without consideration for another supply. Taxability of the penal charges. Taxability of the penal charges by the bank, etc. Circulation. Now the applicability of the GST on the penal charges levied by the banks, NBFC or the other regulated entities directing such regulated entities to levy the penal charges in the place of the penal interest. Clarification: the RBI has instructed the REs regulated entities that instead of the penal interest they should charge the penal charges for the non-compliance with the loan terms and not applicable to the credit cards, external commercial borrowings, etc. It was certified, it was clarified that the payments such as liquidities and damages for breach of the contract are not to be considered or not a consideration for tolerating an act or situation. Thus it is now clarified that no GST is required to be paid on the penal charges imposed by the bank and NBFCs for non-compliance with the important loan terms by the borrower. Now, the supply of the goods or the beverages in the cinema hall, circular number 201/39/2013. The cinema halls includes the refreshment stalls, sittings, and the kiosks premises. Separate services. The services of the foods and the beverages in the cinema hall is considered as a restaurant services when they provided separately from the cinema exhibition services. Now, bundle services. However, if the supply of the food and the beverages is bundled with the cinema tickets as a part of the composite supply, the GST rate applicable to the principal supply, which is a cinema exhibition services, will apply to the entire transaction. Taxability of the tenancy rights under GST. The facts of the case: the Pagade system and what is this? Observation and the legal aspect. Leasing of the renting property falls under the schedule 2 of the GST. Schedule 2 of the GST framework, classifying it as a supply of the services. The presence of the stamp duty and the registration charges does not exempt such transactions from the liability, since the transfer of the tenancy right is not the sale of the land or excluding or the building. It remains taxable under GST. Now, clarification: the transfer of the tenancy right is in exchange for the tenancy premium is deemed a supply of the services and is therefore subject to the GST. However, the renting of the resident dwelling, of the residential use of the unregistered person and the registered sole proprietor and the person of the qualification qualifies for the exemption. On the other hand, the outgoing and the surrender tenancy rights in exchange of the portion of the tenancy premium, it is considered as a taxable service under GST. Now, non-supplies listed in the Schedule 3 negative list. Non-supplies listed in the Schedule 3 Para 1 employment contract. Para 1: the services by an employee to the employer in the course or in the relation of the employment of his employment. The taxability of the services by employee to the employer. The casual workers: the services by the casual workers paid on a daily basis for a considered to be a part of the employment and not taxable under GST. Now, director services: a director receiving a remuneration recorded as a salary subject to TDS under section 192 is providing the services in the course of the employment hence not taxable. However, an independent director receiving the sitting fees is not an employee, thus the are taxable under GST. Guys, let me bring the charger. ये फोन में चार्ज नहीं है. to the employer in the course of the relation of his employment, the taxability of the services by the employer to the employer, the casual worker, the okay. Director services are director servicing receiving the remuneration recorded as a salary subject to details under section 192 is providing the services in the course of the employment, hence non-taxable. However, an independent director receiving the sitting fees is not an employee, thus the fees is taxable under GST. Non-compete fees, any amount paid by an employer to an employee for not joining the completing business is taxable as it is a service of the forbearance. Then the clarification on the perquisite and non-taxable perquisite, any supply from the employer to an employer as per their contractual agreement is not subject to GST exemption from the free services if housing club membership and health benefits are provided as per the employment contract. They do not attract GST. No taxability of the ESOP, ESP, and RESU. The Indian companies offer the employee stock option plan. The Indian companies employee stock option plan, employee stock purchase plan, restricted stocks unit, option of their foreign holding options of their foreign holding company to its employees as per the employment contract. Upon employees exercising these options, the foreign holding company directly allots the share to the employees, and the cost is reimbursed by the Indian subsidiary to the foreign holding company not a supply. The ESOP, ESP are not part of the employment remuneration and are not considered as a supply. The securities are not goods or the services. The sale purchase of the securities is outside the GST scope. The reimbursement of the cost subsidiary reimbursement of the foreign holding company on the cost basis is not taxable under GST. However, if the additional fees, markup, or the commission is charged, it's considered important of the services, and GST is applicable under the reverse charge. Case study: ESOPs offered by the ABC Tech Private Limited in India from the Global Tech Insurance under section US. Subscribe the channel, guys. The services by any court or the tribunal established under any law for the timing in force The explanation: the term court includes the district court, high court, and the Supreme Court. The liability of the GST on the amount fees charged on the Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. The Consumer Dispute Redressal Board is okay. Tribunal characteristics: hence para 2 is applicable for such court. Hence para 2 is applicable for such courts. GST exemptions for the complaint registration fees. No GST on the penalties on the payment and the payment. Now para 3, the services of the MPMLA etc. The services of the MPMLA etc. The functions performed by the members of the parliament, members of the state legislature, members of the panchayat. Duties performed by the person holds the person hold to the persons in the provisions of the constitution of that capacity. Duties performed by any person as a chairperson or the member of the director in any body established before the commencement of this clause. Para 4, the funeral services of the funeral bureau cremation. Para 2, schedule 3 negative list. Schedule 3 negative list. Schedule 3 negative list. First is the employment contract. First is the employment contract. The fees by the employer to the employer and the course of the relation of his employment. Negative list: first is the employment contract. Second is first is employment contract. Second is services by the court. Third is services by MPMLA. Third is services by MPMLA etc. Fourth para 4 funeral burial etc. Para 5, the sales of the land and building. Sales of land and building. Actionable claims other than the specified actionable claims. Exclusion of the actionable claims. The schedule 3 excludes the actionable claims except the specified actionable claims from the definition of the supply. This means that only the specified actionable claims are considered as supplies while other actionable claims are not. Examples of the actionable claims: the rights to recover the insurance money, the right to recover insurance money claims or arrears claims for arrears of rents, bills of exchange, promissory notes, right out to the benefit of the contract, right to the benefit of contract, and exactly the specified actionable claims: betting, casino gaming, horse racing, lottery, and the online money gaming. Online para 7 and 8 not applicable for the interlevel apportionment of the co-insurance premium. Activity of the apportionment of the co-insurance premium by the lead insurance to the co-insurance for the insurance services jointly supplied by the lead insurance and the co-insurance and the insured and the insurance company and the co-insurance agreement is subject to the condition that lead insurance pays the CGST, SGST, UGST on the entire amount and the premium paid by the insured and the premium paid by the insured. Then the para 10, the services by the insurance to the reinsurer, the services by the insurer to the reinsurer for which the setting commission or the reinsurance commission deducted from the reinsurance premium paid by the insurance to the insurer subject to the condition that the CGST, SGST, UGST and IGST is paid by the insurer on the gross insurance premium payable by the insurers to the insurer inclusive of the said setting commission. यहाँ पर non-supplies notified wide notification section 7 to non-supplies notified wide notification section 7 to the activities related to the panchayat municipality panchayat under section 20 through 34 municipality 234 243 243W. Now the grant of the alcoholic legal license. The services related to the granting of the alcoholic legal license by the government are not classified as the supply of the goods or the supply of the services. Now, the services related to the granting of the alcoholic legal license by the government are not classified as the supply of the goods or the supply of the services. Although these licenses are issued against a fee, this exemption specifically available to the legal license does not extend and does not extend to the other license or the privileges under GST. Now, consequently, the services provided by the government business, such as the granting other license, mining rights, uses of the natural resources like spectrum, are subject to GST with the business liable to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism. Now, circulars. Interstate movement, various modes of the convenience between the distinct persons. Circular number 1 and now modes of the convenience: trains, buses, trucks, tankers, trailers, vessels, containers, aircraft. Now scenario: intrastate movement of the convenience but DDDP GST levy. Now the convenience carrying goods passenger between DDP. No GST on convenience for the repair and the maintenance. No GST on the convenience repair and maintenance on the convenience by the deemed distinct persons. GST payable deemed supply schedule 1. The convenience moved for the further supply. Further supply. GST payable treated as the supply of the goods or the supply of the services. On the convenience carrying goods passenger both between DD. No GST on the convenience for the repair and maintenance. No GST on convenience repair maintenance on convenience repair and maintenance on convenience by the distinct person. Now circular number 2 scenario: GST interstate movement of the rigs tools spare parts accommodated with the convenience between the deemed distinct person. No GST on the rigs. For the supply of these goods between distinct persons, GST, SGST, and IGST is applicable. Composite and mixed supply. Now, GST applicability and the challenges in the supply classification and the challenges in the supply classification. GST is levied on the goods, services, or both at a specified rates. The proper classification as a supply as either goods or the services, along with its applicability category, is essential for determining the correct GST rate. However, some supplies involve the combination of the goods or the services known as a bundled supply, making the classification and tax rate determination complex. Each component within such supplies may attract a different tax rate, posing the challenges in the taxation. Now, identification of the composite and the mixed supplies and determining the naturally bundled supplies. To address this classification issues, GST law categorizes the bundled supply into the composite supply and mixed supply, providing the clarity about their treatment. Whether a supply is classified as a composite or a mixed depend on the whether the components are naturally bundled in the ordinary course of the business. The concept of the naturally bundled supplies is derived from the definition of the composite supply under the GST law. Composite supply and its classification: the tax liability of the composite or a mixed supply shall be determined in the following manner, namely the classification of the composite supply comprising of the two or more supplies, one of which is one of which is a principal supply, shall be treated as a supply of such principal supply shall be treated as a supply of such principal supply. Now, meaning of the composite supply: the composite supply is provided by the taxable person to the recipient. A composite supply a composite supply is provided by a taxable person to the recipient. It involves two or more taxable supplies of the goods or the services, or both, or any combination. These supplies are naturally bundled and ordinarily provided together in the course of the business. One of these supplies is designated as a principal supply. The bundling of the composite supply. In a composite supply, goods, services, or both are bundled together due to the inherent requirements. The components in the composite supply are interdependent with uh, with one being the principal supply. Now, meaning of the principal supply: the principal supply in a composite supply refers to the supply of the goods or the services that forms a primary and the most significant part of the composite supply. Any other supply included in the composite supply is considered ancillary and the link between the principal supply. Now, the indicators of the naturally bundled supply. Now, determining Determining whether the supply is naturally bundled depends on the factors such as consumer perception, hotel stay with the breakfast, industry practices. Example: TV with the warranty, printer with the scanner. Nature of the services. Mobile phone with charges. Additional indicators. Example: single pricing, common advertising, integral elements. Now, the case studies of the composite supply, the hotel conference packages. Hotel conference packages includes the accommodation, foods, and the other services. The principal supply convention services, and the entire packages is taxed accordingly. The shirt manufacturers a contract for the ready-made shirts include the packaging, transport, and the insurance. The principal supply is the sale of the shirt, and the whole transaction is taxed as the supply of the goods. Now the travel tickets with the additional services. Travel ticket with the additional services. The flight ticket includes the goods insurance and the lounge access. Launch access. The principal supply is the transportation, and the entire services is taxed as the passenger transport. By identifying the principal supply, the business can ensure the correct GST classification and the taxation for the composite supply, mixed supply, and its classification. The classification of the mixed supply comprising of the two or more supplies shall be treated as a supply of that particular supply. Comprising two or more supply shall be treated as a supply of that particular supply, which attracts the highest rate of supply. Meaning of the mixed supply involves a taxable person offering the two or more individual supplies of the goods or the services, or a combination of both single price. These supplies are provided together for a single price, but they do not qualify as a composite supply. Independent supplies. Unlike composite supply, the individual components of the mixed supplies are independent and not naturally bundled. Now, determining mixed supply. To classify a supply as a mixed supply, the following factors are considered: the exclusion of the composite supply. The supply must first be ruled out of the composite supply. Not naturally bundled. The components must be independent and not naturally provided together. The ordinary course of the business. Single consideration. If a single price is charged for all included components, it qualifies as a mixed supply. Now, taxation at the highest rate. The entire supply is taxed as the highest rate, as the highest rate is applicable to any included items. Food package: a hamper containing a canned foods, goods, sweets, chocolates, cake, dry fruits on each other can be sold separately. They form a mixed supply when sold together for a single price. Refrigerated with the storage bottles. A shopkeeper sells a refrigerator along with the water bottles for a single price. Since the bottles of the refrigerators are independent products, this is a mixed supply. Hello guys. CA Coated, are you there? CA Coated, are you there? Hello Pratik Kumar. Hello. Subscribe the channel for more such study sessions. Be a part of this journey. Guys, it's a break time. I am having my breakfast, so you guys can also enjoy. I am preparing for CA examination, CA Inter. What do you do, Pratik Kumar? Oh, nice. Where are you from? I'm from Mumbai. And you? Oh, nice. You can join our daily live study sessions, and you can suggest this channel to your friends also. So guys, done with the breakfast. Now let's just continue with the studies. The classify the supply as a mix. The following factors are considered. The supply must be first ruled out as a composite supply, not naturally bundled. The components must be independent and not naturally provided together. Not naturally provided together. The ordinary course of the business is a single consideration. If a single consideration is charged for all the included for all included components, for all included components, it qualifies as a mixed supply. Mixed supply, the taxation at the highest rate. At the highest rate, the entire supply is taxed at the highest rate applicable for any included items. Now the key is the case studies of the mixed supply the full package. Okay, refrigerator, house rent and the residential house rent for residential and commercial use. The house rent for out of the house is rented out as a under the single agreement with the one floor used for the residence and the other for the printing press. Since these two purposes are not the natural bundle, the transactions qualifies as a mixed supply. Now CBSE clarification for that, the clarification on the taxability of the printing contracts is circular number 1111. Now this applies like book, pamphlets, brochures, etc. printed with the recipient's content or the composite nature composite nature. The goods or the services depends on the principal supply. If the printing content is principal, it's supply of the, it is a supply of the services. If printing content is principal, it is a supply of the services situation. And in the case of the printing of the books, pamphlets, brochures, annual reports, and the like classification and the like classification and the like clarification for books, pamphlets, etc., where the content is from the recipient and the physical inputs are from the printer. Printing services is the principle. It is the supply of the services. Now, in case of the supply of the printed envelopes, letters, cards, printed boxes, tissues, and the napkins, wallpapers, etc., printed with the design, logo, etc. Clarification: the printed developers, the printed envelopes, boxes, etc., using the recipient design logo with the printer's physical inputs, have goods as a prominent supply. The printing of the content of is ancillary. The printing of the content is ancillary, making it a supply of the services for the books, pamphlet, etc. If the printing in the case of the books, pamphlet, brochures, annual reports, and the like. Now, guys, are you there? कौन है अभी लाइव? Food supplies to the patient. Food for in the patient as per the doctor's nutritionist advice. Is a part of the composite supply of the healthcare, not separately taxable. The other hospital food supplies for the hospital or for the non-admitted patient attendants or visitors is taxable. The activity of the bus bodybuilding circular number 34/8/2018. The bus bodybuilding involves the supply of the goods and the services. The classification goods or the services depends on the principal supply determined the case by case. Now retreading of the tires circular number 34/8/2018. In retreading, the dominant element is the service of the retreading. Rubber used in the ancillary. The supply of the retreaded tires with the old tires owned by the supplier is the supply of the goods. Now the GST and the salvage. GST on the salvage wreck value of the motor insurance claim. Now, as per the circular number 215, the GST implications on the salvage wreck value in the motor vehicle insurance claims depends on how the claim is settled. Deduction of the salvage value. If the claim is settled after deducting the salvage value, the ownership of the salvage remains with the insured. The insurance of the salvage since the salvage does not becomes the property of the insurance company, and the deduction is not considered as a supply, and the reduction is not considered as supply. GST is not applicable. The full insured declared value full insured declared value. IDV settlement in the if the claim is settled in the full insured declared value without deducting the salvage value. The salvage becomes the property of the insurance company. When the insurance company later sells the salvage to the buyer, it qualifies as a supply, and GST is applicable on the sale of the salvage. Now, GST on the preferential location charges. GST on the preferential location charges, PLC. in the real estate circular number 243, 234, 234, 28, 2014. As per the circular number 234, the GST treatment for the preferential location charges collected in the real estate transaction is as follows. The integral to the construction services preferential location charges. The option to choose a specific apartment location is an integral part of the construction services supply. Now the part of the composite supply, since the PLC is naturally bundled with the construction services, it is treated as a part of the composite supply. Now some same tax treatment for the construction of the services. PLC is subject to the same GST rate as per the main supply of the construction of the services. Construction services provided it is levied before the issuance of the completion certificate. Now GST implications on the vouchers. GST implication on vouchers. The issue whether the transaction in the vouchers are supply of the goods or the services under GST. Clarification: the RBI recognized vouchers prepared instrument. RBI recognized vouchers prepared instrument PPIs like gift cards or the treated as a money which not taxable under GST. Non-RBI recognized vouchers are usually actionable claims. Non-RBI recognized vouchers are usually actionable claims which are not supplied as per the schedule and hence not taxable. The conclusion: the vouchers themselves are not taxable as they either money or actionable claims. However, the goods services redeemed using the vouchers are taxable at the time of the redemption. Now issue GST treatment of the vouchers transaction by the distributor agents. Clarification: the principal to principal P2P basis. The distributors buy vouchers. Distributors buy vouchers at a discount and resell them. The margin is the revenue. These activities treated as a trading and the money actionable claim. Hence no GST is applicable on the such transaction. Now commission fee basis agency model. The distributor act on behalf of the issuer. This distributor act on the behalf of the distributor. GST applies. The GST is applicable on the commission or the fees received as it is a supply of the services. Now the service summary: the GST applies only when the service is provided like promotion or the distribution, not trading on the vouchers themselves. Issue GST applicability on the additional services related to the vouchers. Clarification: the distributors, sub-distributors or the third parties may provide the additional services to the vouchers issuer such as advertisement. No branding customization. Technology support, customer support, etc. These services are rendered as per the contractual agreement with a voucher issuer for the service fee, affiliate charges or the similar considerations. Such services are considered as the independent taxable supplies, and the service provider is liable to pay GST, and the service provider is liable to pay GST. Then issue GST treatment of the unredeemed vouchers breakage. Now clarification: the breakage refers to the value of the vouchers remaining unredeemed after the expiry. In case of the breakage, there is no redemption of the vouchers and no supply of the underlying goods services. Therefore, there is no supply. Now, circular number 178 states that the agreement do not refrain from an act requires the explicit or implied consent. In this case of the breakage, there is no such agreement between the voucher issuer and the redeemer. Therefore, breakage cannot be considered as a service, is considered a service or an act of the forbearance. Now, as a result, the unredeemed vouchers value breakage is not a taxable supply, under GST, and no GST is even now reverse charge and ECO. The reverse charge mechanism defines the reverse charge. Reverse charge means the recipient pays the GST for the certain notified supplies. Normally the supplier is liable, but the reverse charge shifts to the recipient. The shift in the liability and the compliance under the reverse charge, the recipient becomes the liable for GST payment and compliance tasks like registration tax deposit and the return filing. This shift applies to the specific categories. specific categories of the supply designated by the government on the GST Council recommendation. Now the definition: reverse charge, section 2 clause 98, section 2 clause 98, section 2 clause 98. The means the liability or to means the liability to pay the tax by the recipient of the supply of the goods or the services, or both, instead of the supplier of such goods or the services, or both, under the section 93 or 94, or under the section 53 and 54 of the Integrated Goods and the Services Tax etc. Act. Now section 2 clause 93 recipient already seen in the chapter 2. Okay. The applicability only for the notified goods and the services inter or intra. Now the assessment: the supplier has to assess the tax and transfer it to the recipient. Reverse charge: the recipient has to assess the payment to the central government. The supplier is liable to make the payment to the central government. The recipient is liable to make the registration. The supplier has to be registered and the has to register under the GST. The recipient has to register compulsorily under section 24. Under section 24, now due date of the payment: monthly, in some cases quarterly. Now the time of the supply goods: section 12 of the CGST Act. Services: section 232 of the CGST Act. Now goods: section 12 of the CGST. Same. Now mode of payment: electronic credit ledger, electronic cash ledger. By using the electronic cash ledger only, recipient cannot use his electronic credit ledger for the payment of the GST on such supply. But after the payment of the GST under the RCM, he can take the input tax credit as per the provision of the ITC. Now important note: there is no forward reverse charge. There is no forward or reverse charge in case of the exempted nil credit supply, as no taxes payable on such supplies. Reverse charge scenario in GST law: in scenario 193 CGST as GST 915 of the SGST, they applies to the specified goods or the services. Recipient of the supply is liable to pay the tax directly. Case scenario 2 the CGST Act, SGST Act, and the IGST and the IGST Act relates to the specified goods or the services from the unregistered person to specified class of the registered specified class of the registered person, registered recipient. The tax liability falls on the registered recipient. The goods or the services notified under the reverse charge mechanism under section 93 and of the CGST Act section 53 of the IGST Act are as follow: the liability under the RCM for the supply of the goods, notification number 2007 in central tax, not relevant for the exam, then why it is given. The supply of the services taxable under the reverse charge mechanism. The services: first is the important explanation. Services from the GTA. Services for GTA: the person who pays or is liable to pay the freight for the transportation of the goods or the services. GTA in the goods carriage located in the taxable territory, which shall be treated as a person who receives the services for the purpose of the notification. For this notification, the body corporate has the same meaning as assigned to the section 12(11) of the Companies Act 2013. Limited liability partnership LLP forms a registered formed and the registered person and the registered under the provision of the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2018 shall also be considered as a partnership firm or a firm. The special examination for the scope of the government, the provisions of this notification insofar as they apply to the central government and the state government, and the state government shall also apply to the parliament, the state of the legislature, courts and the tribunals. Now, the notified services under Section 93 of the CGST Act, under Section 53 of the IGST Act, and the services where 100% tax is payable by the recipient, notified person, goods transport agency, GTA services, supply GTA. Now, GST rates for the GST services: 5% of the tax rate, 2.5% GST and SGST, 5 and the GST when the GT doesn't claim input tax credit RTC on the goods or the services used for providing the GDS services, and the liability under RCM and the liability. However, under this case, the recipient under RCM can take the ITC of such a 5% tax paid by him. Now, 12% of the tax rate, 6% when the GT opts to pay the GST under the forward charge mechanism at this rate and avails the ITC on the goods or the services used by the GTA services. The reverse charge the supply of the services in relation to the transportation of the goods or the road goods by goods transport agency to notified person liable to pay tax. Now, the notified recipient located in the taxable territory who is liable to pay freight. Now, the societies under the Societies Registration Act, cooperative societies, person registered under GST Act. The goods transport agency transports the goods of couple and company partnership firm which is not registered under the GST and the GST the services provided by the goods transport agency for the transportation of the goods by the road or to the notified person whether registered or not under the law, under any law. Under GST is people under the reverse charge basis by the recipient discussion and the conclusion. In the given case, the safe transfer is the transporting goods of the couple and which is not a notified person, which is a notified person. The couple and company is liable to pay GST under the reverse charge, and it shall apply for the compulsory registration under Section 24. Non-applicability of the RCM. Non-applicability. The RCM doesn't apply when GTA transport goods services to central, state, union territory, government department, establishment, local authorities, government agencies. The RCM doesn't apply when the GTA transport goods or the services to them. Then the register for the tax deduction under Section 51 not for the taxable supplies. RCM shall not apply. Forward charge is applicable if GTA is registered under CGST exercise the option to pay the tax on the service tax on the service of the GTA under the forward charge and GTA has issued a tax invoice to the recipient charging a section charging CGST at the applicable rates and has made a declaration on such invoices. The once exercise the option, GTA has to pay the tax in the future years until it shifts to the reverse charge basis reverse charge mechanism by filing a declaration based on the interpretation and the clarification. If such a consignment note is not issued by the transporter, the supplier will not come within the ambit of the GT. The individual truck tempo operator who do not issue any consignment are not covered within the meaning of the term GTA. Within the term GTA, the exemption is available for the services provided by the GTA to an unregistered person, including the unregistered CTP other than the notified recipient. If the recipient is individual or HUF or any other unregistered person and not following under notified categories, the exemption is available. The exemption is available. The goods transport agency means any person who provides the services in relation to the goods and the by the road and base consignment notes now the non-applicability of the RCN. The RCN doesn't apply to the GT goods, GT transport goods for the central tax union, territory government, union territory government, government establishment, local authorities, goods governmental agencies registered for the tax reduction under section 51 not for the taxable supplies, the ASM shall not apply. The forward charge is applicable if the GT is registered under the CGST or CGST. The exercise option to pay tax on the services of the GTA under the forward charge, and the GTA has issued a tax invoice to the recipient charging the CGST act at the applicable rate, and has a declaration and has made a declaration on such an invoice and such invoices. Note the one exercise the option one once exercise the option, GT has to pay the tax in the future year until it shifts the reverse charge mechanism by filing declaration. Now, once the exercise the option, the GTA has to pay based on the interpretation and the clarification. If the consignment is such a consignment note is not issued by the transporter, the supplier will not come within the ambit of the GT. The individual truck tempo operator who do not issue any consignment note for and not covered with the meaning of the term GTA. Now, the exemption is available for the services provided by the GD to an unregistered person, including the unregistered CTP and registered CTP, other than the notified person, if the recipient is an individual or a chief or any other unregistered person, and not following the notified categories. The exemption is available. There is no GST is payable under the forward charge or the reverse charge mechanism. The notified recipient includes the factory societies, cooperative society, registered person under the GST body, corporate, PF and EOP, CTP. Now the legal services reverse charge the service provided by way of the legal services directly or indirectly by any individual advocate, including the senior advocate or the firm of the advocate to any business entity located liable to pay tax. Now the definition, the legal services the encompasses the advice consultancy or assistant. Any branch of the law includes the representational services before any court, tribunal or authority. Now the senior advocate, if the Supreme Court or the High Court is of the opinion that by virtues of his ability standing at the bar of the special knowledge or the experience in the law, he is deserving of such distinction. Of the business entity means the person carrying out the business, Now the exemption is available to the legal services forward charge and reverse charge if supplied to the body corporate having an aggregate turnover not exceeding the threshold in the previous year. In the previous financial year, supplied to the non who are the reverse charge means what are the reverse who is responsible to pay the taxes under the GST. The reverse charge under GST, reverse charge means the recipient of the goods or the services liable to pay GST instead of the supplier. The recipient of the goods or the services liable to pay GST instead of the supplier. Under section 9(3) and 9(4), the liable to pay GST. Typically the supplier is responsible to pay GST to pay GST to pay GST to pay GST. However, under the reverse charge mechanism, this responsibility shifts to the recipient in the following cases. Section 9(3), the supply of the goods and or the services notified by the government on the GST Council recommendation. Section 9(4), the supply of the goods and or the services by the unregistered supplier and the registered to the registered person as as notified by the government, as notified by the government in accordance with the reverse charge provision under the GST Act. Give the answers to the following with reason. With reason is the IGST on the reverse charge basis payable on the interstate supply. Also is reverse charge application of the supply on the supply is the reverse charge applicable on the supply of the goods. Also or is it only of the supply of the services in case of the supplier eligible to threshold exemption if the services charge applicable? Yes, the provision of the relating to the reverse charge are also applicable in case of the interstate supply as the section 5 and 54 of the GST of the IGST. Yes, the government have the notified supply has the notified supply of the goods as well as the services for payment of the tax on the reverse charge basis. Yes, the supplier may not have paid the tax due to the threshold benefit, but this does not excuse the recipient from the liability which is arising under the reverse charge mechanism under section 93 and 94 of the GST of the CGST Act. Now GTA services provided to an unregistered person. GTA services provided to an unregistered person, including the unregistered casual taxable person, are exempt from the GST by virtue of the entity number 21A of the GST law. Discuss the validity of the above statement. Now the statement is invalid. The statement is invalid. The services provided by the GT to an unregistered person, including an unregistered casual taxable persons, are exempt except when provided to the factory society, cooperative society, body corporate, then the partnership firm, registered casual taxable person, registered casual taxable. Now the section 93, the RCM are notified supply of the goods or the services. Legal services by the advocate. The Visa Private Limited Pune has appointed a senior advocate, Ms. Pooja, for representation company's legal matter. The legal provision if the legal services are provided by an individual advocate, including the senior advocate, to a business entity located in the taxable territory, then the GST is payable on the reverse charge basis by the recipient notified under section 93. The legal services including representation made on the legal matters. Discussion and conclusion. In the given case, Pooja is a senior advocate providing the representation services to the business entity that is VSmart Private Limited Pune. Therefore VSmart Private Limited is liable to pay GST under the reverse charge for the services provided by Ms. Pooja. The services by the government under the GST law, the tax and the taxable services supplied by the central government or the state government to the business entity in India are payable by the recipient of the services. State the exception of the above statement. Now the answer: the GST on the services supplied by the central government or the state government of the business entity in India are payable by the recipient of the supplier, except the notified under section 90. The service by the renting of the immovable property to an unregistered business entity to an unregistered. The services by the Department of the Post and the Ministry of the Railway Indian. Now the services in the relation of the aircraft or the vessel inside and outside the percent of the port on or an airport. The services by the transport of the goods passenger, the renting of the immovable property by an Indian Railway to any person. Now the services on the renting of the residential dwelling. Mr. Ram, who is registered under the GST, has 4 flats and 2 shops in Pune. He has given all the flats and the shops on the rent as follows in the determinant payable in such a case. One flat is given on the rent to Mr. B, salaried person, for his residential. The legal provision, the services supplied by way of the renting of the residential dwelling or by the person to the registered person, then the under reverse charge. The registered person is liable liable to pay the tax. Now the services by way of the renting of the residential dwelling to the unregistered person for the purpose of the residence is exempted. Also, as per the new entry, the renting of the immovable property other than the residential dwelling by an unregistered person to a registered person other than the composition dealer, then under reverse charge then under reverse charge the registered person is liable to pay tax, but if the recipient is a composition dealer then the reverse charge is not applicable. Now discussion the renting of the flat 1 to Mr. B is a salaried unregistered person is exempt from the payment of the GST. Now renting of the flats to XYZ Limited is registered person for the use of the guest house is liable to GST under the reverse charge, and XYZ Limited is liable to pay tax. Now the exemption is available only if the flat is given on the rent only for the residence purpose. In the given case, the even though Mr. C is a registered person but he has using the flats for the official purpose, hence the renting of the services is taxable under the forward charge, and Mr. Ram is liable to pay tax. Now if Mr. Ram is an unregistered person and has given two commercial shops on the rent to a partnership firm who is registered under GST, then the under reverse charge partnership firm is liable to pay the tax. But if the partner firm is not a composition levy, then the no tax is payable. Now Mr. Prem, a director of the Sun Moon Company Private Limited, provided the services to the composition for the remuneration of 1,25,000. Company 1,25,000 briefly answer the GST is applicable in the below mentioned independent cases. If yes, who is liable to pay GST? Mr. Prem is an independent director of the Sun Moon Company Limited and not employee of the company. If the services are provided by the director in his company to his company located in the taxable territory, then under reverse charge the company is liable to pay tax. Now these services by an employer to an employer in the course of or in the relation to the employment, then it is not treated as a supply as per the CBIC. If TDS on the director's remuneration is deducted under section 192 of the Income Tax Act, then it is in the course of the employment, it is in the treated as a supply and not liable to GST. If the TDS on the director's fees or remuneration is deducted under section 194G and the Income Tax Act is professional or the technical services, then it is treated as a supply and liable to GST under the reverse charge. Now discussion and conclusion. Mr. Prem being an independent director is not an employee of the company, hence it is treated as a supply and liable to GST under the reverse charge. Therefore, GST is payable by the Sun Moon Company Private Limited. Now, in this case, the salary of the 60,000 is not taxable as it is provided by the course in the course of the employment, and also TDS deducted under section 192. However, 65,000 has been declared separately other than the salary. Therefore, TDS is deducted under section 194J. Hence it is taxable as a supply under the reverse charge of the Sun Moon Private Limited is liable to pay tax. Now the services by the recovery agent. Yes Bank located in Nagpur appointed Mr. Mahesh as a recovery agent for collecting the outstanding balances amount of loan from one of its customer. Mr. Mahesh provided this service to Yes Bank for which it charge a fees determine the tax implication as per the CGST Act. Now, if the services are supplied by the recovery agent to the banking company or a financial institution or a non-banking financial company located in a taxable territory, then GST is payable on the reverse charge basis by the recipient notified under section 93. Now, conclusion. In the given case, Yes Bank shall be liable to pay GST. Mr. Vicky Franklin, an unregistered person, author, unregistered famous author, unregistered famous, received 3 crores on the consideration from Shiv Bhavan Publications located in Indore for the supply of the services by way of the temporary transfer of the copyright covered under the section 13(1)(a) of the Copyright Act 1957 relating to the original literary works of his new book. He finished his book and made available the book to the publisher, but has yet not raised the invoice. Mr. Vicky Franklin is the view of the SVP is liable to pay tax under the reverse charge on the services provided by him. SBP does not concur with his view and is not ready to deposit the tax under any circumstances. Examine whether the view of the Vicky Franklin is correct. Further, if the view of the Vicky Franklin is correct, what is the recourse available with the Franklin do comply with the requirements of the GST Act, and the SVP has completely refused to deposit the tax. See under RTP. Okay. ड्यूटी तक पढ़ा था लीगल सर्विसेज यहाँ पे पढ़ा था डेफिनेशन लीगल सर्विसेज encompassment as consultants in the branch of advice and the branch of law includes the representation services before the court, tribunal and authority senior advocate if the Supreme Court or the High Court is of the opinion of the virtue of the ability, then the exemption. The exemption is available to the legal services forward charge or RCM. Guys, do subscribe the channel. Arbitral tribunal. The reverse charge in the respect of the services provided to the agreed to be provided by arbitral tribunal, the business entity in the taxable territory liable to pay tax. Arbitral tribunal. Now the arbitral tribunal is a private tribunal constituted by the parties in the dispute where one or more person attributable are referred by the parties of the resolve the dispute in themselves and by whose decision they agreed to be bound. Now exemption. The exemption is available to the arbitral tribunal in no forward charge if the supplied of the if the business entity supply to business entity having a threshold in the previous financial year supply to the non-banking non business entity supply to non business entity. Let's continue, guys. Now, sponsorship services reverse charge in relation to the in relation to the sponsorship advice by any person other than the body corporate substituted by the notification number 725. हेलो गाइस कौन कौन है लाइव हाय लिख दो एक बार in relation to the sponsorship services by other than the body corporate to any body corporate or a partnership liable to pay tax. Makes the payment of XYZ fund, Gandhi event Navratri. This is a both are embraced within the admin and questions slogan the season for the smart education, which is the established out of the community and they are asking the smart is liable to pay tax. Then the reverse charge any services by central government, state government, union territory legislators related to the business entity located in the taxable territory, non-applicability of the RCM if the following services are provided by the government to the legislative assembly, then the forward charge is applicably taxable. The renting of the immovable property subject to the entities 5A. Now the services by the Department of the Post and the Ministry of the Railways, Indian Railways, services related to the aircraft or vessels, whether within or outside the port of the airport premises, transport of the goods or the passenger. Exemption is available to the government services, no forward charge and reverse charge if supplied to the body business entity. काम हो गए थे जन हाँ ये पूछ रहा The services supplied way of the renting of the immovable property by central government, state government, union territory, and the legislative assembly, excluding the Ministry of the Railway, Indian Railways, to any registered person, the registered person under the CGST Act liable to pay tax, any registered person under the CGST Act. Now, analysis on the basis of the combined reading of the entry 5 and 5A in the renting movable property to the unregistered person, the forward charges applicable as per the above entry 5. If the renting movable property to the registered person, the RCM is available, the RCM is applicable. The reverse charge RCM is applicable as per the entry 5A and the registered reverse charge mechanism. In the provision of the reverse charge applicable notification applies to the central government, the state government, and the legislative boards and the tribunals. Now, the renting of the residential dwelling, the services by way of the renting of the residential dwelling by any person to the registered person, a residential dwelling is a place of the property designed and used primarily for the people to live in and such a house under such a house department or the other type of the housing units. Non applicability of the RCM. The applicable the following services are subject to the forward charge the renting of the commercial building or the complex to any person. The RRD for the commercial or office use of the unregistered person. The exemption is applicable to RRD, no forward charge and RCM. The RRD is a residential use. RRD for the residential use to the unregistered person. RRD to the registered person individual who is using his personal capacity and not for the business detail discussion in the exemption chapter. Now 5AB renting of any immovable property other than the residential dwelling. The reverse charge the services by way of the renting of any immovable property other than the residential dwelling by any unregistered person to any registered person other than the person who has opted to pay the tax under the composition levy liable to pay tax. Now the corresponding amendment is not done under the IGST Act and by the IGST. This implies that if there is an interstate supply of these services to the registered person, RCM is applicable irrespective of the whether such residential purpose is a composite dealer or not. Notification number 245 2 and 2025. Now payment of the GST of the on RCM. The payment of GST on RCM on the renting of the immovable property other than the residential dwelling commercial property by unregistered person to the registered person under the composition levy is hereby regularized for the regularized for the period from the 10/10/2024 to 15/1/2025 on as where as it is where is basis. Now the services by the director, the reverse charge, the services supplied by director of the company, service supplied by the director of the company or the body corporate to said body to said company or the body corporate liable to pay tax. Note whole level whole time managing director, not whole time managing director, executive director or are employees of the company. Independent director, one of the conditions of being independent director is the director should not have been employed in the company. Employee of the company. Non-executive part-time director can be called as the employee of the company. Hence the sitting fees commission is taxable. Now the clarification of the director's remuneration. Clarification on the director's remuneration. Now if the remuneration is classified as a salary in the company's books and TDS is deducted under section, it falls under the schedule 3 of the CGST. The services by an employer to the employer, no GST is liability arises in this case. However, if any part of the remuneration is classified separately as a fees under section 194G, that portion is considered taxable under GST. The company must pay GST under RCM on this amount. Now the classification of the services supplied by the director on this personal capacity, circular number 201/39/2013. The issue whether the services supplied by the director of the company, issue whether the services supplied by the director of the company in his personal capacity, such as renting of the immovable property to the company or the body corporate, or taxable under RCM. Clarification: it is clarified that the services supplied by the director to the company or the body corporate of the company, or to the company or the body corporate in his private personal capacity, such as services supplied by way of the renting of the immovable property, are not taxable under RCM. For however, if the services supplied by him as or in the capacity of the director as or in the capacity of the director of that company or the body corporate shall be taxable under RCM. The reverse charge, the services supplied by the insurance agent to any person any person carrying the insurance business. Insurance company is liable to pay tax. Now, definition of the insurance agent. Insurance Act An insurance agent is a license under the section 142. They receive compensation like commission. This compensation is for the activities like soliciting the insurance, including the renewals and the drivers. Recovery agent reverse charge the services supplied by the recovery agent to the banking company for the financial institution or the NBFCs located in the taxable territory liable to pay tax. Now the question here. Now copyright services for music art, etc. The reverse charge the supply of the services by way of the transfer or permitting the use of the enjoyment of the copyright covered under section 13(1) of the Copyright Act 1957 to the music company composer, the liable to pay tax, a music company producer liable to pay tax. Now the copyright services by the auditor, the services there is a reverse charge the supply of the services by way of the transfer or permitting the use or the enjoyment of the copyright covered under section 13(1) of the Copyright Act 1957 relating to the original literary works by the author to the publisher located in the taxable territory. Now option to pay under the forward charge, the reverse charge is not applicable in the following cases: if the author will pay tax under the forward charge, he has taken the registration under the CGST Act and filed a declaration in the prescribed form that he exercises the option to pay the CGST on the said services under the forward charge in accordance with the section 9(1) and the company with all the provisions as they apply to the person liable for the paying the tax in relation to the supply of any goods and the services, and that he shall not withdraw the said option within a period of 1 year from the date of the exercising such option. He makes a declaration in the invoice issued by him in the prescribed form to the publisher. Note: thus where the author is registered make the declaration. Now the services by the members of the overseeing committee oversee reverse charge the supply of the services by the members of the oversee committee to the Reserve Bank of India RBI liable to pay tax. Now the services provided by the director or direct selling agent reverse charge the supply of the services by the individual direct selling agents GSA other than the body corporate partnership or LLP partnership other than the body corporate partnership or LLP by individual direct selling agent DSA other than the body corporate or partnership to the banking company or the NBFC indicated located in the taxable territory liable to pay tax. Now the services provided by the business facilitator services, the reverse charge the supply of the services by business facilitator to a banking company located in the taxable territory liable to pay tax. The business facilitator or a business correspondent means an intermediary appointed under the business facilitator model or business correspondent model by the banking company or an insurance company under the guidelines issued by the RBI. Now the services by the business facilitator is covered under the RCM. Here not a business correspondent. Services provided by the agent to the business correspondent. Reverse charge the supply of the services by an agent of the business correspondent to a business correspondent located in the taxable territory. It would be taxable. Now the security services reverse charge security services reverse charge the services provided by way of the supply of the security services by a person other than the body corporate to a registered person located in the taxable territory. Non-applicability of the RCM based on the provision the following cases where the forward charge is applicable. The security services are applied to the central government established local authority government registered person paying tax under section 10 of the CGST Act in the composition scheme based on the interpretation dog sniffer investigation service background check CCTV security IT enabled equipment security services is provided by the body corporate services the supplier to the unregistered person renting of the motor vehicle GST rates for the renting of the motor vehicle services 5% renting of the motor vehicles the GST rates for the renting of the motor vehicle services 5% when the supplier of the services has taken only the limit of the input tax credit, and in the same line of the business 12% tax when the supply opts to pay GST and avails the ITC on the goods or the services used for the service for such services. Now the reverse charge the provided by way of the renting of the any motor vehicles designed to carry the passenger, where the cost of the fuel is included in the consideration charge from the service recipient by any person other than the body corporate not opting under section 12A to any body corporate located in the taxable territory. RCM shall be applicable only if all the below given conditions are satisfied. The supplier is not a body corporate. The supplier does not issue the invoice charging GST at the rate 12%. The services recipient is a body corporate located in the taxable territory. Now the situation in which the corporate recipient are liable to pay GST on the renting of the motor vehicle designed to carry the passenger under the RCM. Now issue the question. The question which arose the consideration is whether the RCM is applicable the services of the renting of the motor vehicle designed to carry the passenger or the services of the transportation of the passenger. Discussion. There is a clear distinction between the two services which is as under the renting of the motor vehicle. The vehicle is hired for the period of time and the user controls how it's used. Scheduled routes, etc. The passenger transport services fixed schedule like buses or the taxis for the specified car. The clarification. RCM would apply on the renting of the vehicles if the body corporate use the manner it is like a subject to the agreement with the person providing the vehicle on the rent. The RCM would not apply on the transportation of the passenger if the body corporate avails the said services for the specific journey on the voyages and do not take the vehicles on the rent of any period of time. Now the lending of the securities reverse charge. The services of the lending of the securities under the securities lending scheme by lender, that is a person who deposits the securities registered in his name or in the name of any other person duly authorized on the behalf with an approved intermediary or the purpose of the lending under the scheme of the SEBI. Now to borrower if a person who borrows the securities under the scheme through an approved intermediary. SEBI. Now GST in the real estate and the RCM under the section 94 the legal services legal provision section 94 CGST Act. When supply of the goods or the services by the unregistered person to the registered person, the central tax is in respect of the supply of the specified category of the goods or the services both by the supplier who is not registered to the specified class of the registered person shall be paid by such person on the reverse charge basis as the recipient of the such supply of the goods or the services or both the all the provisions of the acts all the apply. So recipient liable to paying the tax in the relation to the supply of the goods or the services or both notified goods or the services. Section 94 under section 94 reverse charge. The value of the inputs and the input services purchased from the registered supplier is less than 80% by the purchaser from the unregistered person to the promoter, than 10% liability to the person liable to pay tax in the promoter in case of the cement of the supplier in case of the cement by supplied by the unregistered person to the promoter, then 100% liability shall be paid by the promoter in case of the capital goods by the supplier to the unregistered person the promoter, then 100% liability shall be paid by the promoter. The tax payable by the ECO to the notified person. ECO. Who is the ECO? What is the ECO? As per section 2 clause 45 of the CGST, ECO means a person who owns, operates and manages the digital electronic facility to perform the electronic commerce. It displays the products as well as the services that are actually supplied by some other persons to the consumer in other electronic portal, and on placing the order for the particular product the services, the actual supplier supplies the selected product services to the consumer. The price consideration for the product supply is collected by the ECO from the consumer and is passed on to the actual supplier after the deduction of the commission by the ECO. the liability of the ECO. The government notified the central certain supplies on the recommendation of the council. The tax of the interstate on the intrastate supply on the intrastate supplies on which shall be paid by the ECO in such a services or the supplied through it all the provisions of the GST Act shall apply by the ECO as if he has the supply he is the supplier of the liable of the paying the tax for the supply of such services. The liability to pay tax if the ECO does not have the patient's presence in the taxable territory. The ECO does not have the physical presence in the taxable territory. The person responding to the issue to any purpose in the taxable territory shall be liable to pay tax if the ECO does not have the physical presence and also does not have the representative in the taxable territory. ECO shall appoint a person in the taxable territory for the purpose of paying the tax in the notified ECO. Now the following are the services which are supplied through the ECO. The transportation of the passenger by cab, etc. These services by way of the transportation of the passenger by the radio, taxi, motor car, maxi cab, motorcycle, etc. The motor vehicles except omnibus. These services by way of the transportation of the passenger by omnibus except where the person supplies such services through the electronic commerce operator is a company. The company is e-commerce operator would be taxable. Renting of the accommodation of the unregistered hotels. The services by way of providing the accommodation of the hotels in guest houses, clubs, composites or other commercial place meant for the residential or the lodging purposes. Exception in the issue is not liable where the person supplying such services through the electronic commerce operator is liable to the registration under section 22(1) of the CGST Act. The services of the unregistered plumber would be ECO, and restaurant services would be ECO if it's. So guys, it's about 2 hours now. Let's just end this session because मेरा टैक्स अभी पढ़ के हो गया है. Now I will take a small break, then we will continue with some other subject. We'll think it later. Bye bye.